Is this me? Can you guys hear me? Am I doing this right? I can't tell. You're live. We're building an audience for you. Okay. All right. This is me. Hello. Hello, Shane. So this is essentially just like Periscope, it seems. Hi, Nicholas. Jose, yes, we can hear you. All right, guys. How you doing? It is morning in beautiful Coquitlam, British Columbia, and I am here using the Facebook version of Periscope, which they have apparently copied the architecture of exactly. As somebody said on Twitter earlier today, though, it's okay in a sense, though, because then you don't have to download a bunch of other stuff, I guess. So here I am. We did a video yesterday, and woke up this morning at an apartment where they were testing fire alarms, and the combination of the lack of sleep last night and the fire alarms this morning has put me in a position where I have copious amounts of jet fuel here. Starbucks. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's coffee. All right. Dude, have my ugly babies. You can keep them. Okay, so here's your opportunity, guys, for you to give me any questions that you may have on all things to do with the projects that I've got going on and the new record and all that. So hit me. What does it say? Look out, there's someone behind you. What are you willing to tell us about the musical direction of the new album? Is failure a good representation of the record? Um, in a sense, I think. I think that particular song is. I think the thing that makes any record interesting is the fact that they're all um, sort of a unique identity, and within the parameters of what Transcendence was, the theme that was so important, as it is with every record, a theme is so important because then it gives you a trajectory that you can flesh out from the beginning to the end. And for me on this one, the theme was perhaps about letting go of that need to control every aspect of it and involve friends and the co-workers that I had chosen to involve on this project with it, and so that trajectory became very distinct. There was a beginning, a middle, and an end. And Failure works specifically because that was the first song that we had written together, the only one on the record that's like that. And in a sense, it stands on its own, but it's indicative of the overall vibe. All right, that was a long question. I'm going to try and show that down. Alligators or crocodiles? Um, I don't know. Alligators. It's a more pointy word. See you in Sweden sometime in November. Smile, smile, smile. Dallas is waiting. Why won't you play anything from Strapping Yolette anymore? We've gone over that a million times. I'm going to try my damnedest to come see you. Oh, see, this is different though because these questions disappear so quick. All right. What's it like being a real live Canadian? I don't know. What's it like being a real live you? I think a lot of the times I get confused by the whole Canadian versus American versus European versus Japanese versus anybody. It's like everybody's kind of clueless, and whatever our identities are, I think just provide a background bias. New album, I think it comes out September sometimes. New Gojira, I like it a lot. I think Gojira are great. Do you miss the Dreads? Absolutely not. I did keep them. They're in a box somewhere. I don't miss them at all. That was a horrendous, toxic nightmare. Do you plan to shoot any videos for the album? Yeah, we did yesterday. We shot one for the song Stormbending, and I put myself in a position of having to see myself all day, which is no good for anybody at this age. When you tour, when is the tour with Annika going to happen? Well, Annie and I are doing the Prague Fest together in Atlanta this year, but there's no other shows currently put on the map. As a guitarist, oh, I'm going to lose these questions. They go so quick. How did Nolly's involvement help with the whole process? Nolly's brilliant. He's got fresh ears. He doesn't have a dip in his high mid frequency where a click has been relentlessly pounding him for the past 40 years. Nolly was great, and I look forward to working with him again. Love the guy too. Will Ghost and Decon get a vinyl press? I don't know about that actually. I would hope so. Will Annika Van Giersbergen be in Toronto for the September show? No, she won't, unfortunately, but we will make sure that we tour with her at some other point again. Do you plan to work with Vi again? Yes. At some point, Steve and I will certainly work together again. How do you feel about the upcoming book? Only half there. That was indicative of a lot of the transformative qualities required to do um, transcendence, and as well as it puts you in a position where you have to analyze your past and patterns start to emerge, and by being able to sort of objectively look at those patterns, it actually helped the process in a lot of ways. One thing leads to another. In a lot of ways, the book was no different than making a record. How was the Royal Albert Hall? The Royal Albert Hall was beautiful, wonderful experience. When do you think people will finally stop asking about SYL? Never, but I understand it because that was a really great band and I really appreciate that music. What do you think about Steven Wilson? I think he's brilliant. Obviously, I don't spend much time with his music. In a realistic circumstance, how many toddlers do you think you could fight at once? I can't even do one, to be honest. Will there be a continuation of the Zilstoid story? Not currently. I'm actually over it for the time being. So we banished him to that planet, the Casualties planet at the end of Z2. Do you consider yourself more critical about writing music than you were? Man, this moves so fast on this one. I wonder if you can make this questions bigger or small. Oh, you can scroll like this. Wait. Would you consider yourself more critical about writing music than you have been back in SYL? Well, I mean, you know, I'm critical of everything that I do, but I think a lot of it is, um, it's not about the music. I say that often, like a broken record, but it's true. It's the process, and I'm critical about the process, and oftentimes the music is just an exhaust of all this, and sometimes I like it, and sometimes I don't. You know, sometimes I'll get a creative idea that I want to follow through on, and then halfway through it, I recognize that it actually doesn't do it for me as a actual piece of music, but the process itself is important enough for me to continue on it. All right. Oh, see, I can stop it. I now have control. Yes, ultimate control. Yes. Are you planning to pull out any songs that you've never played for the North American tour? Yeah, we started rehearsal last week, and we're going through now, trying to like putting together an hour-long set with 25 hours worth of material is, as you can imagine, really difficult because you find yourself trying to appease not only yourself and the band and the expectations of the audience, but also what is going to work and what's going to have a good momentum live too. So we have been practicing some things that never thought would see the light of day, which is kind of cool. Let's see. Yay cats. Hey Sophia. Yes, absolutely. Yay cats. What I do find though, as I get older with cats and dogs, the conditional nature of cats is something that at one time I used to really appreciate, but now there's a certain aspect of me that likes the dog part of the world too, where you don't have to play any psychological games with them because you know they have to shit because they're in that position. Would you consider support from local musicians on any of your shows? I think a lot of it's maybe a fallacy sometimes when there's an assumption. I don't know if fallacy is the right word, but there's an assumption that bands when they tour choose the local acts or choose the bands that play the shows, and a lot of times it's kind of out of your control. We have booking agents, and there's vested interest with the clubs and with the territories and all these sorts of things that I very rarely have any opportunity to have influence directly over local bands playing at the show. If you had to name what two albums of your back catalog the new album is a mix of, what two would it be? I think what I had hoped to achieve with Transcendence was the idea of creating almost like an archetype of what this group of people together represent. And it's taken us 10 years and a lot of touring to sort of get used to each other and have a good perspective on what each other's parameters are. And within the confines of that, I think we managed to put all that together, and it's become, like I say, sort of like an archetype of what the DTP sound has been trying to do for a long time, and having Nolly as well to sort of refine the sonic aspects of it. I'd say it's, you know, a little bit of everything, to be honest. Do you hope to release a really heavy album in the future? Yeah, the symphony actually is. I feel like in a lot of ways, for a lot of years, I've been on a self-imposed leash since strapping, where I had, you know, wanted to be accountable for every word and every pronoun and every note, and my reasons for that have been rooted in, I think, accountability and trying to be able to have a complete grip on what it is that I'm trying to say. I think in the past, working from the point of view of total catharsis, specifically when my frame of mind was um, not compromised, but, you know, like drinking or smoking weed or whatever. And then I found that my connection to art and music on autopilot is such that my subconscious plays into things in ways that I got to be very careful about, or else everything resonates with that energy. That being said, since strapping, starting on the first Ziltoid record and up till Transcendence, I think I've kept myself very tightly controlled. And there's an aspect of that that has served me well, I think, and has created things that have a certain value for me as a person, and I've learned a lot from it. But I need to let her loose in some ways, and I think that the symphony is an opportunity to do that. I think that the first thought when you think symphony is you know, sort of like the po-faced, you know, trying to be avant-garde or whatever. But I just want to use those sorts of sounds and that sort of aesthetic to make something that's apocalyptic in a way, but beautiful. Okay, what's it like working with Steve Vai? Awesome, I bet. Yes, awesome. Do you miss your skillet? No. About your wet signature sound, is the delay in series with the reverb or in parallel? It's in series. So basically, my sound, if I'm working on a clean sound, would be a single coil into a compressor, into a light overdrive, maybe a wah on the front, and then a tremolo. And then typically I do like an analog delay, and then I'll have a ping pong delay, and then a big reverb on the ping pong. So reverb on top of reverb. Does Cat Apple have a dirty sense of humor? There's a video guys playing at NAMM where she says the phrase donkey show. Cat's awesome. She's a musician that I grew up listening to, and I've had a ton of respect and love for her for, you know, most of my adult life. But she can take any of us on with a flute. It's awesome. Would you consider of doing another master class? I'm doing a guitar clinic in Vancouver next Tuesday, I think. And in terms of master classes, there's a ton of options on the table for me to do things such as that. But it's trying to find the best combination of my own mental health and time, trying to make it work between it all, and trying to fit it in with the schedule that's pretty intense right now. But eventually, yes. Can you give us tips on mixing songs? If I've got hundreds of tracks, I take them one at a time, and I do submixes. So what seems daunting at first, you know, moving a mountain is one rock at a time. So I'll go through one track, and then I'll EQ it so it sounds appropriate to me, and then isolate that with the next one, and then do everything in relationship to each other. And then once I've finished that session, I'll do a submix of that entire thing into 2 tracks, and then bring it into a new session, and then I just start whittling it down, and then eventually you've got really controlled stems that you can work on. But the biggest thing, I think, is not to over EQ, and also high and low pass, just to sort of get rid of that shrapnel in the low and high frequencies. Okay, do you have any fetishes? Eating. Do you plan on doing a big show like the 2 you did at Royal Albert in Vancouver? It's interesting, you know, it's like I've been here for 40 years, more than 40 years, and playing at home is a strange sort of thing, because it's like, you know, it's where you live. It's sort of a stress thing for me, but eventually I do like the idea of doing bigger shows in North America, but we've been trying to prove ourselves in territories that um, will be able to sustain those ideas, and currently that's been the UK. But the hope is that other territories will see that progression, and then we'll be able to move that into other places. So I'm up for anything. Don't stop making music. Certainly won't. It is akin to a mental illness, and I think that if I did stop it, there would be repercussions far more than anything else. If Arian Lucas were ever to ask you to appear on an album again, would you do it? Arian seems like a nice guy. I don't like appearing on other people's records, to be honest. Um, Favorite part while making music, the creative, when that vision comes, because basically my process includes having a very distinct and immediate vision of what things are upon completion, and then the grunt work the 6 months after of trying to actualize that I can do without. But that one moment of clarity is something that I'll be probably chasing for all eternity here. Uh, okay. One man metal band inspired by DTP. What advice do you have for someone beginning their voyage? Well, actually, that's what the book ended up becoming. Was a not a manual, but I mean, I've had a very unique opportunity in terms of music, and I've managed to sort of create a career for myself that has allowed me to do things that are uncompromising in a lot of ways. But there are compromises, of course. But the book itself is sort of documents it all much easier than I can explain now. Plus, you have to buy it, or you can download it. Either way. Any plans to do another solo acoustic tour? There's been a lot of talk about me doing a acoustic thing to promote the book as well. So if I could do that, then that's an opportunity for me to sort of kill two birds with one stone. And they had talked about that in a couple places, and I'm totally up for it. Thanks for being an awesome musician. Thanks for being an awesome Drew. What are your thoughts on other people using your music as therapy? Well, I mean, as long as there's an understanding that I don't know anything straight out of the gate, then it's hopefully can be used in a similar way to the way that I use it for my own personal growth. But I don't know anything. I'm learning, but everything's a hypothesis. The mixing of the Intronaut album is excellent. Are you doing any work from any other bands currently or in the near future? Would you with any unsigned bands like in the past? I mean, it's all time. Like yesterday, I got up at 6, and then I had to do all my house stuff and then personal stuff, and then I started a video at 8, and the video finished at 9 in the evening, and then we had to unload into the jam space, and then it's home and family, and and then I was up again at 6 this morning. So it's like, the time management right now is so extreme that it's and it's also very important for me to be creative. In order for me to be creative, I've got to have a lot of time to myself. So compounding that with other things work-wise is currently not really an option. What are your favorite non-musical things to decompress? I like to exercise, I like to eat, I like all those sort of blunt physical things, and I like working with driftwood. I make silly things out of driftwood. Favorite band? Why? I don't really have favorite bands anymore. I think my time when I was younger, where I had a bunch of new emotional experiences that compelled me to adhere different sounds and everything to those experiences. I mean, as you get older, as I've gotten older, a lot of those experiences are no longer first off in my list of priorities, and so I don't have like a certain band. I do listen to music all the time, and very rarely is it my own. But a lot of it is, Spotify and what it's suggesting to me, and then friends' bands and things like this. Would you consider doing a soundtrack or film score? Absolutely. However, the times that I've gotten offered the opportunity to do it, the parameters for that are so unlike how I tend to function efficiently that it's in neither of our best interests for me to be told what to do. Actually, we were doing the video yesterday. The poor guys were trying to get me to act a certain way, and I had to tell them pretty quickly as well that that's going to backfire on both of us. So working with a symphony or working on a film score, when you have to be cognizant of what other people want, is something that my energies are again best used elsewhere. Let's see. What happened with the casualties of cool right now? Che and I are writing. We have two songs, and one of my favorite aspects of the casualties project is that there's no pressure or timeline on it, and as a result of that, um, we can allow things to evolve in ways that are natural, and to have the opportunity at this stage of my career to be able to work at that rate is amazing. And guys, I'd like to thank you, all of you, for allowing me to do this. And I mean, even if it's just a passive participation that you have with what I do, the fact that I can continue to do this at this stage of the music industry and at this stage of my life is something I certainly don't take for granted. And in a lot of ways, transcendence and a lot of the music that I've done that involve, sort of getting out of my comfort zone and learning to communicate with the other band members and to collaborate with other people. There's a part of me that truly believes that in order for me to be able to continue making these really uncompromising statements like the casualty stuff or the symphony or a lot of these sort of left of center things, that I don't want to forget the fact that there's a certain aspect of what I do. I mean, I've been playing heavy metal for my whole career basically, and I don't want to leave that and just be like, okay, well now I do other things. So I try and keep aware of the realities of this, and I think that Transcendence is a record that really works to address that whole uh, mentality, plus keep me interested. The process became interesting. I don't even know why we got there. How much time do you use? How long did it take to adapt to open C tuning? I've been doing this for the open C tuning has been Orion sending me a text. Hey Dev, when you get to rehearsal, if you're there before me, let's just put my drum set outside the room for rehearsal and then put them back in after rehearsal. I'm doing a photo shoot tomorrow for someone, or for, okay. All right, so that's here. That's me multitasking. All right. How hyped are you for the new Meshuggah? Fred and I talk every day, every couple of days, and I'm hyped for Fred. Will you make another ambient or mellow ghost? I've got a ton of albums in my sights, like the symphony thing with the moth, and I've got a concept that's very dear to my heart for that. I've got another idea for a very mellow record, really mellow record. I got an idea for two of them. One of them sort of like a garden music thing, and the other one's this weird kind of 70s hard or soft rock thing, and with that sound, all that 70s stuff and Mellotron and all that. But I mean, not Mellotron. What's that other thing called? I don't know, bongos or something. But I mean, I think, and then the bass thing that I want to do. There's so many ideas, but I think if there's anything I got going for me at this point in my career is that I'm able to discern what is something I should devote my energies to, as opposed to sort of cataloging in the to-do list. Okay, how do you feel about the album Sex and Religion now? Would you ever do something with Steve Vai? Sex and Religion is something that's taken me like a lot of years to come to terms with. But people are asking me about, would you do Strapping again or whatever. And when it comes to Steve, yeah, I'd work with Steve again. We should do something. We should do that album at some point. What's your glasses prescription? Terrible. I got to get rid of these things. They're big, hipster-looking, dark-framed weirdness, but they're expensive, so I'm keeping hold of them. Okay. Let's see. Coming to Mexico anytime soon? Don't know. Are you nervous about playing the Bataclan? No, I love France. I understand everything that went there when that whole attack went on. They were talking about like the backstage area, and I mean, I know the venue so well that it was upsetting in ways that were very separate from the event as well. But you gotta get back on the horse, and I love France, and so I'm happy to play there. Is Suicide Squad as bad as critics say? No idea. I have no idea. I'm not a movie buff. Looks like Jared Leto's a bit of a cock, but so am I, I'm sure. Have you ever played in Newfoundland? No, I would love to. Can I buy you a beer at the Glasgow show? I don't drink. Thank you, though. Would you work with Gojira and Isan again? Love them both. If the opportunity came up, a lot of the times, like I worked with those bands and other bands in general, just because we you do something for somebody, and then it's reciprocal. So a lot of the appearances that I've done is based on of the barter system. Like there's not a lot of money in music, and so when people are asking for, if I'm asking for somebody to help me on my record, then the barter is usually that we pay it back. There's a bunch of other bands that I'm working with now, but a lot of it, again, it's a barter system. It makes it easier than trying to come up with money to get people's involvement. Will Stormbending be the next single release? No, the next one's Secret Sciences. Much different than Failure. A lot more sort of proggy and perhaps a little more typical to the ways that you might have heard what I do. But the thing about Secret Sciences, the next song that I do like, is lyrically I think it's interesting because I just scrawled something down one morning. I was just in an odd mood, and that became the lyrics. So it's a very awkward syntax, but it's interesting for me to actually hear it come back. It's like you're just reading out of your diary. Dear diary, dear God, it's me, Margaret. Hey man, I wanted tamales. Yeah, don't we all, brother? Don't we all? I was the recording process of the new album. It was, I remember about halfway into it, I remember talking to Beav, and I said, hey man, this record it's really interesting because I don't feel like I'm losing my mind. And about a week later, I totally went into typical dev mode, and it was brutal. But I think the thing is, you can't make music that's that dense and that intense in terms of your emotional connection to it without going to those depths. I think that if you do make music without allowing yourself to feel it in that sense, then no one else is going to have any connection to it. I went on vacation as soon as this record was done, Transcendence, and I was, I'm always on the fence about it, and specifically with the DTP thing, because it is, the parameters for it are much tighter than I often would like to be doing. I'd like things to be a lot more out, out to lunch. But I do understand the value of it, and I understand the value of learning to participate in it in a way that's complete, and I put a ton of myself into it, and the compromises that go into just working with people. It's just life. And I listened to it when I was away, and the way that I chose to make the ending of the record was such that it was I just thought, oh, this is beautiful. This is a lot of things, and specifically in this particular time where things are sort of overwhelmingly dark, I think, politically and economically, to consciously make statements that are not sort of feeding that, but more so to be able to underline the idea of just well, we're not going to give up here. And I think that's what Transcendence more represents, and to actually have that actualized in a way that was precise was something that I think it's great. But all of it, it's like the process of learning. How do you collaborate with people? How do you collaborate with people that are, fundamentally different than you? All these things, I mean, these are important. And the music is an afterthought. Favorite classical composers? Don't know. Stravinsky, I guess, but that's only because I don't know many others. Gorecki, I don't know. Other than the symphony, are there any themes that you have buzzing in your